Hello, folks at home. Uh, I'm here, of course, to read a little more Lovecraft. I've just turned on the ads, the ad breaks for monetization. I don't know how much that's going to annoy or interfere with watching this live. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. There's only a couple people in here live, so I don't want to mess the experience up. Maybe I'll turn the monetization on later going forward. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, let me concentrate on the matter at hand, which is, of course, reading some more of H.P. Lovecraft's strange, underrated masterpiece, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. I don't know. It's a while yet. Like, I was trying to figure out exactly how long it's going to take me to read this. I don't know. It's 2 or 3 more readings for sure. Maybe 4 or 5. It's kind of long. But I'm going to pick up right where I left off. Our protagonist, Randolph Carter, was just colloquiating with some rather martial cats. I will go ahead and pick up right where we left off. Thanks for being here, guys. Well did the traveler know those garden lands that lie betwixt the wood and the Serenarian sea, and blithely did he follow the singing river Ukronos that marked his course. The sun rose higher over gentle slopes of grove and lawn, and heightened the colors of the thousand flowers. Hey, Marcus. And heightened the colors of the thousand flowers that starred each knoll and dingle. Let me say again, because nobody was here when I said it. I just turned on the monetization with ad breaks for the first time. I don't know what that'll do to the live viewing experience. These reading videos, I definitely want to monetize because I won't be swearing or doing drugs in them. But by the same token, I don't want to fuck up the... Usually won't be swearing in them. I don't want to mess up the live experience for the couple of people coming in here live. So, all right, let me back up to the top. Starting again. Also, if we could just back up over the part where I sweared right after I said I wasn't going to swear. No, you can't undo live. Oh. FCC violation. Marcus, you're giving me flashbacks. Hey, Mel and I. Flashbacks to the 80s. Well did the traveler know those garden lands that lie betwixt the wood and the Serenarian sea, and blithely did he follow the singing river Ukronos that marked his course. The sun rose higher over gentle slopes of grove and lawn, and heightened the colors of the thousand flowers that starred each knoll and dingle. A blessed haze lies upon all this region, where it is held a little more of the sunlight than other places hold, and a little more of the summer's humming music of birds and bees, so that men walk through it as through a fairy place, and feel greater joy and wonder than they ever afterward remember. Was it Bronyor? I've talked about this a lot, but Lovecraft and Robert Howard and C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien echo each other like all over the place, but they pretty much almost certainly did not read each other. It's just because they all loved the same 50 or 60 fantasy and horror classics from before their time. I think it's Bronyor, the place in Lord of the Rings where they go after the Mines of Moria, where one of the elven rings is there secretly, and it's like a magical elf land. By noon, Carter reached the jasper terraces of Chiran, which sloped down to the river's edge and bear that temple of loveliness wherein the king of Ilek Vad comes from his far realm on the twilight sea once a year in a golden palanquin to pray to the god of Ukronos, who sang to him in youth when he dwelt in a cottage by its banks. All of Jasper is that temple, and covering an acre of ground with its walls and courts, its 7 pinnacled towers, and its inner shrine where the river enters through hidden channels and the god sings softly in the night. Many times the moon hears strange music as it shines on those courts and terraces and pinnacles. But whether that music be the song of the god or the chant of the cryptical priests, none but the king of Eilek Vad may say, for only he has entered the temple or seen the priests. Now, in the drowsiness of day, that carven and delicate fane was silent, and Carter heard only the murmur of the great stream and the hum of the birds and bees as he walked onward under an enchanted sun. All that afternoon the pilgrim wandered on through perfumed meadows and in the lee of gentle riverward hills bearing peaceful thatched cottages and the shrines of amiable gods carven from jasper or chrysoberyl. Sometimes he walked close to the bank of Ukranos and whistled to the sprightly and iridescent fish of that crystal stream, and at other times he paused amidst the whispering rushes and gazed at the great dark wood on the farther side, whose trees came down clear to the water's edge. In former dreams he had seen quaint, lumbering buopoths come shyly out of that wood to drink, but now he could not glimpse any. Buopoths. Buopoths. Once in a while he paused to watch a carnivorous fish catch a fishing bird, which it lured to the water by showing its tempting scales in the sun, and grasped by the beak with its enormous mouth as the winged hunter sought to dart down upon it. Toward evening he mounted a low grassy rise and saw before him flaming in the sunset the 1,000 gilded spires of Thran. Lofty beyond belief are the alabaster walls of that incredible city, sloping inward toward the top and wrought in one solid piece by what means no man knows, for they are more ancient than memory. Yet lofty as they are with their 100 gates and 200 turrets, the clustered towers within, all white beneath their golden spires, are loftier still, so that men on the plain around see them soaring into the sky, sometimes shining clear, sometimes caught at the top in tangles of cloud and mist, and sometimes clouded lower down with their utmost pinnacles blazing free above the vapors. And where Thran's gates open on the river are great wharves of marble, with ornate galleons of fragrant cedar and salamander riding gently at anger. Hold on. I said anger instead of anchor because a weird word fucked me up. Calamander, not salamander. Is that correct? Is that a wood? Is there a wood called calamander? Calamander. I mean, don't answer me, I won't hear you. And where Thran's gates open on the river are great wharves of marble, with ornate galleons of fragrant cedar and calamander riding gently at anchor, and strange bearded sailors sitting on casks and bales with the hieroglyphs of far places. Landward beyond the walls lies the farm country, where small white cottages dream between little hills, and narrow roads with many stone bridges wind gracefully among streams and gardens. Down through this verdant land Carter walked at evening, and saw twilight float up from the river to the marvelous golden spires of Thran. And just at the hour of dusk he came to the southern gate, and was stopped by a red-robed sentry till he had told 3 dreams beyond belief, and proved himself a dreamer worthy to walk up Thran's steep, mysterious streets and linger in bazaars where the wares of the ornate galleons were sold. You gotta tell 3 dreams, huh? I guess not many people come up to that gate because that would be time-consuming, I would think. Oh, right. This story has the thing going on where time never passes right and distances never length right. Then into that incredible city he walked, through a wall so thick that the gate was a tunnel, and thereafter amidst curved and undulant ways winding deep and narrow between the heavenward towers. Lights shone through grated and balconied windows, and the sound of lutes and pipes stole timid from inner courts where marble fountains bubbled. Carter knew his way and edged down through darker streets to the river, where at an old sea tavern he found the captains and seamen he had known in myriad other dreams. There he bought his passage to Celephaeus on a great green galleon, and there he stopped for the night after speaking gravely to the venerable cat of that inn, who blinked dozing before an enormous hearth and dreamed of old wars and forgotten gods. In the morning, Carter boarded the galleon bound for Celephaeus and sat in the prow as the ropes were cast off and the long sail down to the Serenarian Sea began. For many leagues the banks were much as they were above Thran, with now and then a curious temple rising on the farther hills toward the right, and a drowsy village on the shore, with steep red roofs and nets spread in the sun. Mindful of his search, Carter questioned all the mariners closely about those whom they had met in the taverns of Celephaeus, asking the names and ways of the strange men with long, narrow eyes, long-lobed ears, thin noses, and pointed chins, who came in dark ships from the north and traded onyx for the carved jade and spun gold and little red singing birds of Celephaeus. Of these men the sailors knew not much, save that they talked but seldom and spread a kind of awe about them. Their land, very far away, was called Inganok, and not many people cared to go thither because it was a cold twilight land, and said to be close to unpleasant Leng, although high impassable mountains towered on the side where Leng was thought to lie, so that none might say whether this evil plateau with its horrible stone villages and unmentionable monastery were really there, or whether the rumor were only a fear that timid people felt in the night when those formidable barrier peaks loomed black against a rising moon. Certainly, men reached Leng from very different oceans. Of other boundaries of Inganok those sailors had no notion, nor had they heard of the cold waste and unknown Kadath, save from vague, unplaced report. And of the marvelous sunset city which Carter sought, they knew nothing at all. So the traveler asked no more of far things, but bided his time till he might talk with those strange men from cold and twilight Inganok, who are the seed of such gods as carved their features on Engranek. Late in the day, the galleon reached those bends of the river which traverse the perfumed jungles of Cled. Here Carter wished he might disembark, for in those tropic tangles sleep wondrous palaces of ivory, lone and unbroken, where once dwelt fabulous monarchs of a land whose name is forgotten. Spells of the elder ones keep those places unharmed and undecayed, for it is written that there may one day be need of them again, and elephant caravans have glimpsed them from afar by moonlight, though none dares approach them closely because of the guardians to which their wholeness is due. But the ship swept on, and dusk hushed the hum of the day, and the first stars above blinked answers to the early fireflies on the banks as that jungle fell far behind, leaving only its fragrance as a memory that it had been. And all through the night that galleon floated on past mysteries unseen and unsuspected. Once a lookout reported fires on the hills to the east, but the sleepy captain said they had better not be looked at too much, since it was highly uncertain just who or what had lit them. In the morning the river had broadened out greatly, and Carter saw by the houses along the banks that they were close to the vast trading city of Helaneth on the Serenarian Sea. Here the walls are of rugged granite, and the houses peakedly fantastic, with beamed and plastered gables. The men of Helaneth are more like those of the waking world than any others in dreamland, so that the city is not sought except for barter, but is prized for the solid work of its artisans. The wharves of Helaneth are of oak, and there the galleon made fast, while the captain traded in the taverns. Carter also went ashore and looked curiously upon the rutted streets where wooden ox carts lumbered and feverish merchants cried their wares vacuously in the bazaars. The sea taverns were all close to the wharves on cobbled lanes salt with the spray of high tides, and seemed exceedingly ancient with their low black-beamed ceilings and casements of greenish bull's-eye panes. Ancient sailors in those taverns talked much of distant ports, and told many stories of the curious men from twilight Ingannock, but had little to add to what the seamen of the galleon had told. Then, at last, after much unloading and loading, the ship set sail once more over the sunset sea, and the high walls and gables of Hellanith grew less as the last golden light of day lent them a wonder and beauty beyond any that men had given them. 2 nights and 2 days the galleon sailed over the Serenarian Sea, sighting no land and speaking but one other vessel. Then, near sunset of the second day, there loomed up ahead the snowy peak of Aran, with its ginkgo trees swaying on the lower slopes, and Carter knew that they were come to the land of Uth-Nargay and the marvelous city of Celephaeus. Swiftly there came into sight the glittering minarets of that fabulous town, and the untarnished marble walls with their bronze statues, and the great stone bridge where Naraksa joins the sea. Then rose the green gentle hills behind the town, with their groves and gardens of asphodels and the small shrines and cottages upon them, and far in the background the purple ridge of the Tenarians, potent and mystical, behind which lay forbidden ways into the waking world and toward other regions of dream. Hey, Nolan, how are you? Nolan, I actually did think of that. I'm going to make sure I keep my address straight, yeah, in case they do send those stimulus checks out. I did think of that today. The harbor was full of painted galleys, some of which were from the marble cloud city of Saranian, that lies in ethereal space beyond where the sea meets the sky, and some of which were from more substantial ports on the oceans of dreamland. Among these the steersman threaded his way up to the spice-fragrant wharves, where the galleon made fast in the dusk as the city's million lights began to twinkle out over the water. Ever new seemed this deathless city of vision, for here time has no power to tarnish or destroy. Zoe, you can't just walk onto the keyboard while I'm doing this. I know I love you too, buddy. You're going to just curl up in my lap? Really? How can I do this with you in my lap? You want to do it? You going to lay down, buddy? Yeah, you're just going to curl up? All right. Yes, you going to lay still? Yeah, you can do it. Go ahead. I'll figure something out. You lay down first. Or just move around in little circles. She hasn't felt well enough to curl up in my lap for a few days because she had the scabs thing going on. But the scabs are almost all gone now. You can see where her fur is still fucked up on the back of her neck. You gonna flop down? There you go, buddy. Yes. All right, I'm gonna move the camera so you guys can see her because she's better than me. All right. You can go, Zoe. I love you too, buddy. All right, I'm gonna read though. I'm gonna hold the book up here. If I can do it. Is this dumb? Can I do this? Ever new seemed this deathless city of vision, for here time has no power to tarnish or destroy. As it has always been, is still the turquoise of Nath-Horthath, and the 80 orchid-wreathed priests are the same who builded it 10,000 years ago. Shining still is the bronze of the great gates, nor are the onyx pavements ever worn or broken. And the great bronze statues on the walls look down on merchants and camel drivers older than fable, yet without one gray hair in their forked beards. Out of control, Zoe. Yes. Carter did not at once seek out the temple or the palace or the citadel, but stayed by the seaward wall among traders and sailors. And when it was too late for rumors and legends, he sought out an ancient tavern he knew well, and rested with dreams of the gods on unknown Kadath whom he sought. The next day he searched all along the quays for some of the strange mariners of Ingannock, but was told that none were now in port, their galley not being due from the north for full 2 weeks. He found, however, one Thorabonian sailor who had been to Inganuk and had worked in the onyx quarries of that twilight place. And this sailor said there was certainly a desert to the north of the peopled region, which everybody seemed to fear and shun. The Thorabonian opined that this desert led around the utmost rim of impassable peaks into Leng's horrible plateau, and that this was why men feared it, though he admitted there were other vague tales of evil presences and nameless sentinels. But it seemed unlikely that and sentinels. On the following day, Carter walked up the Street of the Pillars to the Turquoise Temple and talked with the high priest. Though Nath Horthath is chiefly worshipped in Salaphas, all the great ones are mentioned in diurnal prayers, and the priest was reasonably versed in their moods. It's worth pointing out here that Lovecraft here mentions the great ones, like they're a structured pantheon of gods in a specific religion. This is right after the Call of Cthulhu in this collection. There aren't really precursors for the kind of world building that would require Lovecraft to be consistent about the great ones or the old ones or the great old ones in this context. Tolkien and Lovecraft and Lewis and Howard they were the guys who invented consistent world building in a fantasy context with very few precursors. What is it? What is it, Zoe? Hold on. All right. Yeah, are you gonna go? You're gonna have to go, buddy. That was cute, but Zoe's quarantined in the bedroom. You guys know this. On the following day, Carter walked up the Street of the Pillars to the Turquoise Temple and talked with the high priest. Though Nath Horthath is chiefly worshipped in Salaphas, all the great ones are mentioned in diurnal prayers, and the priest was reasonably versed in their moods. Like Atal and distant Althar, he strongly advised against any attempt to see them, declaring that they are testy and capricious, and subject to strange protection from the mindless other gods from outside, whose soul and messenger is the crawling chaos Nyarlathotep. Their jealous hiding of the marvelous Sunset City showed clearly that they did not wish Carter to reach it, and it was doubtful how they would regard a guest whose object was to see them and plead before them. No man had ever found Kadath in the past, and it might be just as well if none ever found it in the future. Such rumors as were told about that onyx castle of the great ones were not by any means reassuring. Having thanked the orchid-crowned high priest, Carter left the temple and sought the bazaar of the sheep butchers, where the old chief of Salaphas's cats dwelt sleek and contented. That gray and dignified being was sunning himself on the onyx pavement and extended a languid paw as his caller approached. But when Carter repeated the passwords and introductions furnished him by the old cat general of Althar, the furry patriarch became very cordial and communicative, and told much of the secret lore known to cats on the seaward slopes of Uth-Nargai. Best of all, he repeated several things told him furtively by the timid waterfront cats of Salaphas about the men of Inganuk, on whose dark ships no cat will go. It seems that these men have an aura not of earth about them, though that is not the reason why no cat will sail on their ships. The reason for this is that Inganuk holds shadows which no cat can endure, so that in all that cold twilight realm there is never a cheering purr or a homely mew. Whether it be because of things wafted over the impassable peaks from hypothetical Leng, or because of things filtering down from the chilly desert to the north, none may say, But it remains a fact that in that far land there broods a hint of outer space which cats do not like, and to which they are more sensitive than men. Therefore they will not go on the dark ships that seek the basalt quays of Inganok. The old chief of the cats also told him where to find his friend King Karanis, who in Carter's latter dreams had reigned alternately in the rose crystal palace of the 70 Delights at Celophaeus and in the turreted cloud castle of sky-floating Seranium. It seems that he could find no more content in those places, but had formed a mighty longing for the English cliffs and downlands of his boyhood, where in little dreaming villages England's old songs hover at evening behind lattice windows, and where grey church towers peep lovely through the verdure of distant valleys. He could not go back to these things in the waking world because his body was dead, but he had done the next best thing and dreamed a small tract of such countryside in the region east of the city, where meadows roll gracefully up from the sea cliffs to the foot of the Tenarian hills. There he dwelt in a grey Gothic manor house of stone looking on the sea, and tried to think it was ancient Trevor Towers, where he was born and where 13 generations of his forefathers had first seen the light. And on the coast nearby he had built a little Cornish fishing village with steep cobbled ways, settling therein such people as had the most English faces, and seeking ever to teach them the dear remembered accents of old Cornwall fishers. And in a valley not far off he had reared a great Norman abbey, whose tower he could see from his window, placing around it in the churchyard grey stones with the names of his ancestors carved thereon, and with a moss somewhat like old England's moss. I know, Zoe. You got to stay in here, though, buddy. For though Karanis was a monarch in the land of dream, with all imagined pomps and marvels, splendors and beauties, ecstasies and delights, novelties and excitements at his command, he would gladly have resigned forever the whole of his power and luxury and freedom for one blessed day as a simple boy in that pure and quiet England, that ancient, beloved England, which had molded his being and of which he must always be immutably a part. So when Carter bade that old grey chief of the cats adieu, he did not seek the terraced palace of rose crystal, but walked out the eastern gate and across the daisied fields toward a peaked gable which he glimpsed through the oaks of a park sloping up to the sea cliffs. And in time he came to a great hedge and a gate with a little brick lodge, and when he rang the bell there hobbled to admit him no robed and anointed lackey of the palace, but a small, stubbly old man in a smock who spoke as best he could in the quaint tones of far Cornwall. And Carter walked up the shady path between trees as near as possible to England's trees, and climbed the terraces among gardens set out as in Queen Anne's time. At the door, flanked by stone cats in the old way, he was met by a whiskered butler in suitable livery, and was presently taken to the library, where Karanis, lord of Uthnargay and the sky around Seranian, sat pensive in a chair by the window, looking on his little seacoast village and wishing that his old nurse would come in and scold him because he was not ready for that hateful lawn party at the vicar's, with the carriage waiting and his mother nearly out of patience. Karanis, clad in a dressing gown of the sort favored by London tailors in his youth, rose eagerly to meet his guest, for the sight of an Anglo-Saxon from the waking world was very dear to him, even if it was a Saxon from Boston, Massachusetts, instead of from Cornwall. What kind of a Bostonian claims Saxon? Like, all right, it's fine. Nobody I want to know, I don't think, honestly. And for long they talked of old times, having much to say because both were old dreamers and well versed in the wonders of incredible places. Karanis indeed had been out beyond the stars in the ultimate void, and was said to be the only one who had ever returned sane from such a voyage. At length Carter brought up the subject of his quest and asked of his host those questions he had asked of so many others. Karanis did not know where Kadath was, or the marvelous sunset city, but he did know that the great ones were very dangerous creatures to seek out, and that the other gods had strange ways of protecting them from impertinent curiosity. He had learned much of the other gods in distant parts of space, especially in that region where form does not exist, and colored gases study the innermost secrets. The violet gas Singak had told him terrible things of the crawling chaos Nyarlathotep, and had warned him never to approach the central void where the demon Sultan Azathoth gnaws hungrily in the dark. Altogether, it was not well to meddle with the Elder Ones, and if they persistently denied all access to the marvelous Sunset City, it were better not to seek that city. Kuranes furthermore doubted whether his guest would profit aught by coming to the city, even were he to gain it. He himself had dreamed and yearned long years for lovely Celephaeus and the land of Uthnarge, and for the freedom and color and high experience of life devoid of its chains, conventions, and stupidities. But now that he was come into that city and that land, and was the king thereof, he found the freedom and the vividness all too soon worn out, and monotonous for want of linkage with anything firm in his feelings and memories. He was a king in Uthnarge, but found no meaning therein, and drooped always for the old familiar things of England that had shaped his youth. All his kingdom would he give for the sound of Cornish church bells over the downs, and all the 1,000 minarets of Celephaeus for the steep homely roofs of the village near his home. So he told his guest that the unknown Sunset City might not hold quite the content he sought, and that perhaps it had better remain a glorious and half-remembered dream. For he had visited Carter often in the old waking days, and knew well the lovely New England slopes that had given him birth. At the last, he was very certain the seeker would long only for the early remembered scenes, the glow of Beacon Hill at evening, the tall steeples and winding hill streets of quaint Kingsport, the hoary gambrel roofs of ancient and witch-haunted Arkham, and the blessed miles of meads and valleys where stone walls rambled and white farmhouse gables peeped out from bowers of verdure. These things he told Randolph Carter, but still the seeker held to his purpose. And in the end they parted each with his own conviction, and Carter went back through the bronze gate into Celephaeus and down the street of the pillars to the old sea wall, where he talked more with the mariners of far parts and waited for the dark ship from cold and twilight Inganok, whose strange-faced sailors and onyx traders had in them the blood of the great ones. One starlight evening, when the Pharos shone splendid over the harbor, the longed-for ship put in, and strange-faced sailors and traders appeared one by one and group by group in the ancient taverns along the seawall. It was very exciting to see again those living faces so like the godlike features on Engranek, but Carter did not hasten to speak with the silent seamen. He did not know how much of pride and secrecy and dim supernal memory might fill those children of the great ones, and was sure it would not be wise to tell them of his quest or ask too closely of that cold desert stretching north of their twilight land. They talked little with the other folk in those ancient sea taverns, but would gather in groups in remote corners and sing among themselves the haunting airs of unknown places, or chant long tales to one another in accents alien to the rest of dreamland. And so rare and moving were those airs and tales, that one might guess their wonders from the faces of those who listened, even though the words came to common ears only as strange cadence and obscure melody. For a week the strange seamen lingered in the taverns and traded in the bazaars of Celephaeus, and before they sailed, Carter had taken passage on their dark ship, telling them that he was an old onyx miner and wishful to work in their quarries. That ship was very lovely and cunningly wrought, being of teakwood with ebony fittings and traceries of gold, and the cabin in which the traveler lodged had hangings of silk and velvet. One morning at the turn of the tide, the sails were raised and the anchor lifted, and as Carter stood on the high stern, he saw the sunrise blazing walls and bronze statues and golden minarets of ageless Celephaeus sink into the distance, and the snowy peak of Mount Aran grow smaller and smaller. By noon there was nothing in sight save the gentle blue of the Serenarian Sea, with one painted galley afar off bound for that cloud-hung realm of Seranian where the sea meets the sky. And night came with gorgeous stars, and the dark ship steered for Charles Swain and the Little Bear as they swung slowly round the pole. And the sailors sang strange songs of unknown places, and then stole off one by one to the forecastle, while the wistful watchers murmured old chants and leaned over the rail to glimpse the luminous fish playing in bowers beneath the sea. Carter went to sleep at midnight and rose in the glow of a young morning, marking that the sun seemed farther south than was its wont. And all through that second day he made progress in knowing the men of the ship, getting them little by little to talk of their cold twilight land, of their exquisite onyx city, and of their fear of the high and impassable peaks beyond which Leng was said to be. They told him how sorry they were that no cats would stay in the land of Inganok, and how they thought the hidden nearness of Leng was to blame for it. Only of the stony desert to the north they would not talk. There was something disquieting about that desert, and it was thought expedient not to admit its existence. Yeah, the Nyarlathotep comes up in this story. You may know it. I don't know if you know it. On later days, they talked of the quarries in which Carter said he was going to work. There were many of them, for all the cities of Inganok was builded of onyx. All the city of Inganok was builded of onyx, whilst great polished blocks of it were traded in Rhinar, Ogrothan, and Celophaeus, and at home with the merchants of Thra, Ilarnik, and Kadatharan, for the beautiful wares of those fabulous ports. And far to the north, almost in that cold desert whose existence the men of Inganok did not care to admit, there was an unused quarry greater than all the rest, from which had been hewn in forgotten times such prodigious lumps and blocks that the sight of their chiseled vacancies struck terror to all who beheld. Who had mined those incredible blocks, and whither they had been transported, no man might say, but it was thought best not to trouble that quarry, around which such inhuman memories might conceivably cling. So it was left all alone in the twilight, with only the raven and the rumored shantak bird to brood on its immensities. When Carter heard of this quarry, he was moved to deep thought, for he knew from old tales that the Great One's castle atop unknown Kadath is of onyx. Each day the sun wheeled lower and lower in the sky, and the mists overhead grew thicker and thicker. And in 2 weeks there was not any sunlight at all, but only a weird gray twilight shining through a dome of eternal cloud by day, and a cold, starless phosphorescence from the underside of that cloud by night. On the 20th day, a great jagged rock in the sea was sighted from afar, the first land glimpsed since Aran's snowy peak had dwindled behind the ship. Carter asked the captain the name of that rock, but was told that it had no name and had never been sought by any vessel because of the sounds that came from it at night. Hey, some dude, what's up? And when after dark a dull and ceaseless howling arose from that jagged granite place, the traveler was glad that no stop had been made, and that the rock had no name. The seamen prayed and chanted till the noise was out of earshot, and Carter dreamed terrible dreams within dreams in the small hours. 2 mornings after that, there loomed far ahead into the east a line of great gray peaks whose tops were lost in the changeless clouds of that twilight world. And at the sight of them the sailors sang glad songs, and some knelt down on the deck to pray, so that Carter knew they were come to the land of Inganok and would soon be moored to the basalt quays of the great town bearing that land's name. Toward noon a dark coastline appeared, and before 3 o'clock there stood out against the north the bulbous domes and fantastic spires of the onyx city. Rare and curious did that archaic city rise above its walls and quays, all of delicate black with scrolls, flutings, and arabesques of inlaid gold. Tall and many-windowed were the houses, and carved on every side with flowers and patterns whose dark symmetries dazzled the eye with a beauty more poignant than light. Some ended in swelling domes that tapered to a point, others in terraced pyramids whereon rose clustered minarets displaying every phase of strangeness and imagination. The walls were low and pierced by frequent gates, each under a great arch rising high above the general level and capped by the head of a god chiseled with that same skill displayed in the monstrous face on distant Ingranec. On a hill in the center rose a 16-angled tower, greater than all the rest, and bearing a high pinnacled belfry resting on a flattened dome. This, the seamen said, was the temple of the Elder Ones, and was ruled by an old high priest, sad with inner secrets. At intervals, the clang of a strange bell shivered over the onyx city, answered each time by a peal of mystic music made up of horns, viols, and chanting voices. And from a row of tripods on a gallery round the high dome of the temple there burst flares of flame at certain moments, for the priests and people of that city were wise in the primal mysteries and faithful in keeping the rhythms of the great ones as set forth in scrolls older than the Akkadic manuscripts. As the ship rode past the great basalt breakwater into the harbor, the lesser noises of the city grew manifest, and Carter saw the slaves, sailors, and merchants on the docks. The sailors and merchants were of the strange-faced race of the gods, but the slaves were squat, slant-eyed folk said by rumor to have drifted somehow across or around the impassable peaks from valleys beyond Lang. The wharves reached wide outside the city wall and bore upon them all manner of merchandise from the galleys anchored there, while at one end were great piles of onyx, both carved and uncarved, awaiting shipment to the far markets of Rhinar, Ogrothan, and Celophaeus. It was not yet evening when the dark ship anchored beside a jutting quay of stone, and all the sailors and traders filed ashore and through the arched gate into the city. The streets of that city were paved with onyx, and some of them were wide and straight, whilst others were crooked and narrow. The houses near the water were lower than the rest, and bore above their curiously arched doorways certain signs of gold said to be in honor of the respective small gods that favored each. The captain of the ship took Carter to an old sea tavern where flocked the mariners of quaint countries, and promised that he would next day show him the wonders of the twilight city, and lead him to the taverns of the onyx miners by the northern wall. And evening fell, and little bronze lamps were lighted, and the sailors in that tavern sang songs of remote places. But when from its high tower the great bell shivered over the city, and the peal of the horns and viols and voices rose cryptical in answer thereto, all ceased their songs or tales and bowed silent till the last echo died away. For there is a wonder and a strangeness on the twilight city of Inganok, and men fear to be lax in its rites lest a doom and a vengeance lurk unsuspectedly close. That kind of reminds me of Silent Hill. I don't really remember how that goes, the thing with it, like the bell going and everything goes scary. I never played the games, I only saw the movie. What is it, Pie Wacket? You think I should call it? You think I should be done? Far in the shadows of that tavern, Carter saw a squat form he did not like, for it was unmistakably that of the old slant-eyed merchant he had seen so long before in the taverns of Dilath Lean, who was reputed to trade with the horrible stone villages of Leng which no healthy folk visit and whose evil fires are seen at night from afar, and even to have dealt with that high priest not to be described, which wears a yellow silken mask over its face and dwells all alone in a prehistoric stone monastery. This man had seemed to show a queer gleam of knowing when Carter asked the traders of Dilath Lean about the Cold Waste and Kadath, and somehow his presence in dark and haunted Inganok, so close to the wonders of the north, was not a reassuring thing. He slipped wholly out of sight before Carter could speak to him, and sailors later said that he had come with a yak caravan from some point not well determined, bearing the colossal and rich-flavored eggs of the rumored shantak bird to trade for the dexterous jade goblets that merchants brought from Ilarnik. If they're selling the eggs, I'm not sure the birds are rumored. I mean, is he saying like the eggs are awesome, and when people are like, what are those eggs from? they're from Shantak birds. And when people are like, "What's a Shantak bird?" They get dodgy. Those eggs are amazing, man. I want to buy 6 more of them. What lays these eggs? Uh, Shantak birds. Yeah, lay those eggs that we sell. Really? What's a Shantak bird like? They're in a safe place, okay? Those birds are in a safe place, okay? Shantak birds. Don't worry about them. We've got the eggs here. Why are you asking all these questions? I think that is what he meant, actually. Lovecraft and Howard both do this thing where there are jokes that are meant to make you laugh out loud, but they're like a slow burn joke. Like you have to be paying close attention. It takes a sentence or two. Where was I? Yes. I am going to stop there for the night, guys. My bad tooth is wrecked. I barely made it this far. And I was going to say I don't want to run out, but this is a long story. It's going to be at least 2 or 3 more readings. Thanks for being here, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Yeah, my tooth is messed up. I might have to miss a night on the live streams, depending on how well that works out tomorrow. I got 1 more dose of antibiotic. If I'm smart, I'm going to the hospital, but it's an hour and a half walk to the ER. So thanks for being here, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. Always a pleasure. Always fun.